Richard was a man who owned more businesses than most people could imagine. He was a billionaire, known in newspapers for his sharp decisions and in magazines for his wealth. But despite all the numbers in his bank accounts and all the glass towers with his company's name shining on them, Richard often felt a strange emptiness inside. He had meetings, dinners, interviews, and travel schedules packed tightly together. Yet, some afternoons, when the city seemed too loud and the boardrooms too cold, he escaped quietly into the park just to watch people. That day was one of those afternoons. The sun was soft in the sky, the kind of golden light that made leaves shimmer. Children were running across the grass, some chasing a ball, others laughing loudly while swinging from the monkey bars. Parents sat on benches, sipping coffee and chatting with each other. For Richard, it was a simple scene, but it carried more warmth than any expensive party he had attended. He liked to walk slowly along the pathways, unnoticed, just another man in a suit among strangers. As he passed near the playground, a sound caught his attention, not laughter but something quieter, something heavy. It was the sound of a sob. He slowed down and turned his head. That was when he noticed her. A young girl, no older than 11 or 12, was sitting in a wheelchair near the edge of the playground. She wasn't playing, she wasn't laughing. Her small hands were folded tightly in her lap, and tears rolled down her cheeks, leaving thin lines across her face. She was watching the other children, but not with joy. Her eyes carried loneliness, the kind that pulled at a person's heart without a single word being spoken. Richard stopped walking. For a moment, he just stood there, watching. He felt his chest tighten. The girl's voice reached his ears, soft, almost like she was speaking only to herself. "No one ever chooses me." The words were carried away slightly by the breeze, but Richard heard them clearly. They pierced through him, sharper than anything a board meeting or business deal could bring. He stayed rooted to the spot, unsure if he should move closer. This was not his world. He was used to contracts, formal dinners, and applause at charity events. He wasn't used to small children crying at playgrounds. But something inside him told him he couldn't just keep walking. Something about her reminded him of someone, his sister. Years ago, before his success had filled every corner of his life, his younger sister had suffered from a rare illness. She too had sat alone at times, feeling like the world didn't notice her. Richard remembered her tears, her frustration when others overlooked her simply because she wasn't as quick, as strong, or as free as they were. The memory was sharp. He remembered the nights he would sit beside her bed, telling her stories to make her smile, even when she was too weak to laugh. She had passed away young, and Richard had buried that pain under layers of work and wealth. Yet seeing this girl now was like opening a door he had kept locked for years. His throat tightened, and his eyes grew moist. Slowly, carefully, Richard walked closer. He didn't want to scare her or make her feel pitied. He stopped near a bench a few feet away and sat down. The sound of the children playing filled the air, but he kept his gaze on the ground for a while, giving her space. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see her wiping her face, pretending she wasn't crying. He knew that act well. He had done the same in his younger days when he didn't want anyone to see his pain. After a moment, he turned his head slightly and smiled gently. "It looks like they're having a lot of fun," he said softly, not asking her questions, just making an observation. The girl glanced at him, surprised that a stranger had spoken to her. She didn't answer right away, but her watery eyes showed that she had heard him. Richard didn't push. He leaned back on the bench, letting silence do its work. After a while, the girl whispered, "They never let me join." Her voice cracked. "No one ever chooses me." The words echoed again, breaking his heart. He wanted to tell her that she mattered, that she was important, that her value wasn't tied to whether others picked her for a game. But he also knew that children don't always believe big speeches from adults, especially strangers. They believe actions, they believe presence. So Richard just nodded slowly, as if her pain was his own. He let her see in his face that he understood. That small moment, of being truly seen, mattered more than anything else. For the next few minutes, Richard stayed seated, listening as the girl, her name still unknown to him, shared pieces of her sadness. She spoke in broken sentences, sometimes pausing to wipe her eyes. She explained how at school, whenever the teacher asked students to form groups, she was always the last one standing, left out because no one wanted to pick the girl in the wheelchair. She said how in the park, when teams were made for games, she was told kindly but firmly that she couldn't join. "It's like I don't exist," she murmured. Richard's heart ached. He saw not just a child in front of him, but his sister, and even himself in moments of loneliness he rarely admitted. He realized that despite his billions, despite all the buildings carrying his name, he couldn't erase her tears with money. He had to find something deeper, something real, something that spoke directly to her heart. As he listened, Richard's mind began to form an idea, but he didn't reveal it yet. He knew trust wasn't built in a second. Right now, what mattered was that she knew someone cared enough to sit down and listen. And in that park, in that golden afternoon, a billionaire and a little girl in a wheelchair shared the same kind of silence, one that was not empty, but full of connection. Richard sat quietly on the bench, his eyes gentle and calm, letting the little girl slowly gather her courage to speak. After a few minutes, he leaned forward a little and asked softly, "What's your name?" The girl hesitated, her small fingers moving nervously over the armrest of her wheelchair. Finally, she whispered, "Emily." Richard smiled warmly. "That's a beautiful name. Emily." He said it slowly, as though he wanted her to know he was truly paying attention. She gave a faint nod, and for a moment, her eyes brightened before sadness returned again. Richard didn't want to rush her. He had spent years in meetings where everyone spoke quickly, pushing for answers and numbers, but he knew that real emotions didn't work like that. So, he kept his voice soft and steady. "Emily, I noticed you were watching the other children play. Do you like games?" Emily looked down at her lap, her voice shaky. "Yes. I love games. I like watching them. But they don't let me play. They always say it's too hard for me. Sometimes they even forget I'm here." Her words were like a quiet confession, spoken from the heart. Richard felt his chest grow heavy. He wanted to tell her that she was wrong, that she wasn't invisible, but he knew she needed more than words. She needed someone who would actually listen. "Do you have a favorite game?" Richard asked after a pause. Emily hesitated again, then answered, "I like chess. I learned it at school. The teacher taught me how the pieces move. But nobody wants to play with me because they think it's boring or too slow. I like it because it makes me feel smart. I can use my mind. I don't need to run or jump." Her eyes lit up just a little as she spoke about chess, but soon they dimmed again. "But no one wants to sit and play with me. Not even my cousins. They say it takes too long." Richard's heart softened at her words. Chess. He hadn't played in years, but once upon a time, it had been his passion. When he was in college, before his business empire took over his life, he had been a chess champion. He had spent long nights studying strategies, playing in tournaments, and even teaching younger kids. The game had given him patience, focus, and discipline, the very skills that later helped him succeed in business. Hearing Emily talk about chess was like hearing an echo from his own past. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You know, Emily, I used to play chess too. In fact, I was very good at it." Emily looked at him in surprise. "Really? You played chess?" "Yes," Richard said with a gentle smile. "I loved it. I even won some tournaments when I was your age. I always felt that chess was a game of the mind, not of the body. And sometimes, the smallest person in the room could make the smartest move. Emily's eyes widened. It was the first time she had heard an adult speak about chess with excitement instead of dismissal. For the first time in a long while, she felt like someone understood her passion. Still, her doubt lingered. But you're a grown-up. And rich. Why would you play with me? She asked quietly, as if afraid the question itself would make him leave. Richard's smile grew tender. Because you are worth playing with, Emily. You are worth being chosen. Those words hung in the air, soft yet powerful. Emily blinked back tears. For years, she had carried the silent belief that she wasn't good enough. Now, here was a stranger, a man she didn't even know was a billionaire, telling her she mattered. Richard pulled out his phone and made a quick call. He asked one of his assistants to bring a portable chess set from a nearby shop. Within 15 minutes, the chessboard was delivered right to the park. Emily watched in awe as the board and pieces were unwrapped and set on the bench between them. It was as if magic had happened, all for her. Richard placed the board carefully. White or black? He asked, looking at her with a smile. Emily's lips curved into the tiniest smile. White, she whispered. Good choice, Richard said. White makes the first move. That means you're in control. She reached out slowly, her fingers trembling as she moved the first pawn forward. Richard nodded in approval. Excellent move. As the game began, something shifted. Emily stopped glancing at the children who were running and playing nearby. Her whole focus was on the chessboard, and for the first time that afternoon, she felt important. Richard didn't play to win quickly. He played to teach, to encourage. Whenever she hesitated, he guided her gently. Look carefully. What do you see? Don't rush. You're smarter than you think. Emily began to smile more, her confidence slowly growing with each move. When she captured one of his knights, her eyes sparkled. I got it, she exclaimed. Richard clapped softly. Yes, you did. That was a brilliant move, Emily. Unbeknownst to her, a small crowd had started gathering around them. Some of the other children had noticed the chessboard and were curious. They came closer, whispering, pointing at the unusual sight, a well-dressed man playing chess with a little girl in a wheelchair. At first, they only watched out of curiosity, but soon they became fascinated by Emily's determination and Richard's encouragement. Emily, who once sat alone with tears, now had an audience. For the first time, children leaned over, asking questions. How did you do that move? Can you teach me later? Wow, you're really good. Emily's cheeks flushed with happiness. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was being seen, respected, admired. Richard noticed this and felt a lump in his throat. This was exactly what he had hoped for, not just to comfort her, but to help others see her value. The game stretched on, each move pulling Emily deeper into excitement. At one point, she looked up at him and whispered, "This is the best day of my life." Richard's eyes grew misty, but he smiled through it. And it's just the beginning, Emily. The children stayed around until the game reached its final stage. Emily, with all her focus, managed to put Richard's king in checkmate. She had won. Her hands flew to her mouth in shock. I did it? Richard laughed, clapping his hands. You absolutely did it. You beat me fair and square. And I am proud of you. Emily's heart swelled with joy. The girl who had whispered earlier, "No one ever chooses me," was now the champion of the park. As the sun began to dip lower, painting the sky with orange and pink, Richard knew that something important had happened. It wasn't just about chess. It was about reminding a young girl that she was worth choosing, worth noticing, worth celebrating. That evening, as parents collected their children and the park slowly grew quiet, Emily carried the chessboard on her lap like a treasure. And Richard, walking beside her wheelchair, felt lighter than he had in years. He had given her something no amount of money could buy: dignity, attention, and belief in herself. And in return, she had given him something he hadn't felt in a long time: pure joy. The park had grown quieter as the evening stretched, but Emily's heart was louder than ever. She still couldn't believe what had just happened. She had played chess with a man she barely knew, and not only had she played, she had won. For the first time in a long while, she felt proud of herself. The children who once ran past her without noticing had stood around to watch her game, cheering at her clever moves. She had seen surprise in their eyes and respect in their voices. It felt magical, as though the world had suddenly decided she mattered. Richard, watching her excitement, felt an unusual peace settle over him. He had been to countless business meetings where applause filled the room, but none of that compared to the joy of seeing Emily's small smile. He thought of how life had strange ways of teaching lessons. He had billions, yet the most valuable moment of his day came from sitting on a simple park bench, moving wooden pieces across a board with a little girl. When Emily carefully packed the chess pieces back into the box, she held it like something precious. She looked at Richard shyly and asked, "Do you really think I'm good?" Richard leaned forward, meeting her eyes. "Emily, you are more than good. You are talented, patient, and very smart. Chess is not just a game, it's about thinking, planning, and being brave enough to make decisions. And today, you showed all of that." Emily's lips curved into a wider smile than before. She had been called many things in life: slow, weak, fragile, but rarely had anyone called her talented. The word settled deep in her heart, like a seed waiting to grow. The other children lingered nearby. One boy, who had earlier ignored Emily, stepped closer and said, "Hey, can you show me how you moved your rook like that? I didn't know it could trap a queen." Emily's eyes widened. For the first time, another child was asking her to teach. She nodded quickly, her fingers moving with excitement as she explained the move. Soon, two more children joined, curious about the strategies she had used. Richard stayed quiet, allowing her to shine. This was her moment, not his. As the group formed around Emily, parents began noticing too. A few mothers whispered among themselves, pointing at the sight of a man in a suit patiently sitting with the children, letting a girl in a wheelchair lead the game. Some recognized Richard but kept their distance, unsure if it was really the billionaire they had seen on magazine covers. Still, they couldn't deny the kindness before their eyes. Richard felt a deep satisfaction. Emily wasn't just playing chess anymore, she was connecting. She was no longer the invisible child watching from the sidelines, she was the center, the leader, the teacher. After the crowd slowly thinned and the sun sank lower, Emily turned to Richard. "I've never had a day like this," she said softly. "Usually, I just sit here, and nobody talks to me. Today, I felt like I was part of something." Richard's heart warmed. He thought carefully before replying. "Emily, sometimes people forget that everyone has something special. They look at what they can see, the outside. But what truly matters is here." He pointed gently to his head, then to his chest. "Your mind, your heart, that is where your strength lives. And today, you showed it to everyone." Emily nodded, her eyes shining. She looked down at the chessboard on her lap. "Do you think, if I keep practicing, I could be really good? Like, maybe even a champion?" Richard smiled. "Emily, I don't just think it. I believe it. Champions are not chosen by chance. They are chosen by their courage to keep going, even when no one believes in them. And you, my dear, have already shown that courage." The girl's face lit up in a way that made Richard feel years younger. For him, it was not about creating another champion. It was about showing a child that she was worthy of dreams. Just then, Emily's mother arrived at the park. She looked tired, holding grocery bags in both hands, and seemed surprised to see her daughter surrounded by children and an unfamiliar man. She hurried over. "Emily. Are you all right?" Emily turned to her mother with excitement. "Mom. I play chess. And I won. This is Mr. Richard, he played with me." Her mother glanced at Richard, noticing his suit, his polished shoes, and the respectful way he sat. She didn't recognize him immediately but gave him a polite nod. "Thank you, sir. Emily doesn't often get a chance to play with others. You've made her day." Richard stood up, smiling kindly. "The pleasure was mine. Emily is a wonderful player. She surprised me more than once." Emily's mother's eyes softened. She had seen her daughter cry many nights about being left out. To hear a stranger call her wonderful meant more than words could explain. "That's very kind of you," she said. Emily hugged the chessboard tightly. "Mom, can I bring this home? Mr. Richard got it for me." Her mother looked shocked. "He bought this for you?" Richard nodded simply. "Every champion needs the right tools. This is hers." Tears filled the mother's eyes, though she quickly blinked them away. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay your kindness." Richard shook his head. "No repayment needed. Just let Emily keep playing, keep believing in herself." Emily reached out her small hand toward Richard. "Will you play with me again?" she asked hopefully. Richard bent down, shaking her hand gently. "Of course. Whenever you're ready, Emily, I'll be here." The promise wasn't empty. He meant it. As Richard walked back toward the city lights that evening, he felt something stir deep within him. It wasn't pride, and it wasn't the satisfaction of a business deal. It was something purer, a reminder that life's greatest victories were not in wealth or power, but in moments of kindness that changed another person's story. And Emily's story had just begun to change. For the first time, she went home with a chessboard in her lap, new confidence in her heart, and the memory of being chosen not because of what she lacked, but because of what she truly was. The next few days carried a new kind of light for Emily. She rolled her wheelchair into the park each afternoon with the chessboard resting proudly on her lap. For the first time, she felt eager instead of nervous. She no longer came to simply watch the other children play, now she came with a sense of belonging, as if she had something special to share. The children who had once run past her without a glance began to slow down whenever they saw her. Some of them would smile shyly, others would wave. A few even asked her, "Are you going to play today?" Emily's heart would flutter with joy each time. She was no longer invisible. She was being noticed. On the third afternoon, Richard returned to the park. His schedule had been full: meetings, phone calls, and financial decisions that most people could never imagine handling. Yet, he kept thinking of Emily. He remembered her soft voice saying, "No one ever chooses me," and he knew he had made a silent promise to never let her feel that way again. When Emily saw him walking toward the bench, her whole face lit up. She waved eagerly. "Mr. Richard. You came back." Richard smiled warmly. "Of course I did. A good chess player deserves a rematch." Children nearby gathered quickly, excited to see them set up the board again. But this time, something different happened. Before Richard could even sit down, one of the boys stepped forward and asked Emily, "Can I play against you first? I want to see if I can win." Emily's eyes widened. She had never been asked that before. Her first instinct was to say no, out of habit, but then she remembered Richard's words, "You are worth being chosen." With a small smile, she nodded. "Okay, let's play." Richard stepped aside, watching proudly as Emily took her place. The boy sat opposite her, and soon the game began. The other children leaned in, whispering excitedly as Emily moved her pieces with focus and calm. Her opponent tried his best, but Emily's practice had already sharpened her skills. Within 15 minutes, she had him in checkmate. The children cheered. "She's so good," one of them shouted. Another said, "I want to play next." Richard felt his heart swell. This was exactly what he had hoped for. Emily was no longer just sitting at the edge of the playground. She was at the center, her mind and her strength shining. The same children who had once overlooked her were now lining up to play against her. Emily's mother arrived shortly after, carrying her usual bags of groceries. She stopped in surprise when she saw the crowd. Emily, her daughter who had always been left out, was surrounded by friends. Tears filled her eyes, though she quickly brushed them away. She watched silently, not wanting to interrupt the moment. Richard moved closer and spoke softly to her. "Your daughter is remarkable. You must be very proud." Her mother turned to him, her voice trembling. "I've always known she was special. But seeing others finally notice it, it feels like a dream. Thank you for giving her this chance." Richard shook his head gently. "I didn't give her anything she didn't already have. The brilliance was always inside her. All I did was bring out the spotlight." The words touched her deeply. For years, she had worried that Emily would grow up believing she wasn't enough. Now, she saw hope flickering in her daughter's eyes, and it was worth more than anything. As the week went on, more and more children joined Emily's little circle in the park. Some came to play chess, others just came to watch. Even parents began to take notice, asking questions, praising her for her patience and intelligence. For the first time, Emily felt as though the wheelchair wasn't the first thing people saw. They saw her mind, her laughter, her smile. One afternoon, Richard brought a small gift for Emily. It was a beautiful chess clock, the kind used in tournaments. He placed it on the bench and explained how it worked. Emily's eyes sparkled as he showed her how to press the buttons after each move. "This will help you train like a real champion," he said. Emily touched the clock gently, as though it were made of gold. "Thank you, Mr. Richard. No one has ever given me something like this before." Richard smiled. "Every champion needs the right tools. And Emily, you are on your way to being one." The children watched with admiration. They began to ask if Emily could teach them how to play better. Soon, she was not just a player, she was a mentor, guiding others with patience and kindness. Richard often sat nearby, not always playing, but always watching. He liked to see Emily laugh, to see the way her shoulders lifted with confidence, to see the way the children respected her. It reminded him that true wealth was not measured in dollars but in moments like these. News of the unusual sight in the park began to spread. A few parents shared photos online of the billionaire sitting on a park bench, smiling beside a little girl in a wheelchair. The story touched hearts quickly. People began commenting, saying how beautiful it was to see kindness in action. Some wrote, "This billionaire is teaching us more than money ever could." Others said, "Look at the joy on that girl's face. This is what real change looks like." Emily had no idea she was becoming an inspiration beyond the park. All she knew was that for the first time in her life, she felt chosen. She felt worthy. Richard, on the other hand, began to reflect deeply. He realized that this small act of kindness had given him more peace than all his business successes combined. He found himself looking forward to the afternoons, not for deals or profits, but for the simple joy of sitting with Emily, teaching her, and watching her bloom. One evening, as the sky turned purple with twilight, Emily looked at him and asked, "Mr. Richard, why do you spend time with me? You must be so busy with important things." Richard paused, his heart heavy with emotion. "Emily," he said softly, "I spend time with you because you remind me of something I forgot a long time ago, that life is not about how much we have, but how much we give. You are teaching me just as much as I am teaching you." Emily smiled, her eyes shining. For a girl who once felt invisible, Hearing those words made her feel like the most important person in the world. As they packed up the chessboard that evening, Emily whispered, "This is the best week of my life." Richard looked at her tenderly. "And it's only the beginning, Emily. The world is going to see how amazing you are. And when they do, I hope you never forget what I'm telling you now. You are always worth choosing." The final rays of the sun touched the park as Emily sat proudly with the chessboard resting on her lap. She had played 3 games that day, winning 2 and losing 1, and each match had been surrounded by cheers and laughter from children who now wanted to be part of her world. She was no longer the quiet girl who waited at the side of the playground, holding back tears. She was someone others respected, someone they looked forward to seeing. Richard stood nearby, watching her with a quiet smile. He didn't interrupt, didn't take the spotlight, he simply let her enjoy her moment. His heart swelled as he remembered the day he first saw her crying. It had only been a week, yet so much had changed. A girl who once whispered, "No one ever chooses me," now had more friends than she had ever imagined. When the last game ended and the children began heading home, Emily turned to Richard. Her cheeks glowed with happiness. "Mr. Richard," she said softly, "thank you for everything. I don't feel invisible anymore. I feel like I belong." Richard bent down so that his eyes met hers. "Emily, you never were invisible. You've always been special. The world just needed to stop and look closer. And now they have." Her small hand tightened around the chessboard as though it was a symbol of her new life. "I wish my teacher could see this. She always says I'm too quiet in class. But here, everyone listens to me." Richard nodded. "That's because confidence grows when someone believes in us. And Emily, you should always believe in yourself even when others don't. That's the secret to being strong." As they spoke, Emily's mother arrived to take her home. She stopped a few steps away, her eyes moist as she watched her daughter's joy. For years, she had prayed that Emily would find a place where she felt valued. Now, thanks to a chance meeting with a stranger, that prayer had been answered. She thanked Richard with a trembling voice. "I don't know who you really are, sir, but you've changed my daughter's life. You've given her something I couldn't give, confidence." Richard smiled gently. All she needed was someone to believe in her. The rest was already inside her. That night, Emily went home with a glow in her heart. She placed the chessboard carefully on her bedside table and whispered to herself, "I'm not invisible anymore. I'm chosen." She drifted to sleep with dreams of castles, queens, and checkmates dancing in her mind. Meanwhile, Richard returned to his penthouse overlooking the city skyline. The lights of the buildings sparkled, but for the first time, they felt small compared to the memory of Emily's smile. He sat alone in his living room, thinking about his own journey. He had spent years chasing success, numbers, and recognition. Yet, in one simple afternoon at the park, a little girl had reminded him of something priceless, that true wealth was measured not by money, but by the lives we touch. The story of Richard and Emily didn't stay hidden for long. A parent who had filmed their chess game posted the video online. In just a few days, millions of people had watched it. The comments poured in, "Look at the way she smiles, so precious. This is what kindness looks like. We need more people like this in the world." People didn't just see a billionaire. They saw a man who took time to sit on a park bench, who gave his attention and respect to a little girl in a wheelchair. And they saw Emily, no longer overlooked, but shining with confidence and intelligence. The video touched hearts everywhere. News channels picked it up, and soon Emily became known as the chess girl. Invitations came from schools and community centers, asking if she would play and inspire others. Emily, once shy and hidden, suddenly found herself being celebrated. She didn't let it overwhelm her. With her mother's gentle guidance and Richard's encouragement, she accepted the invitation slowly, playing games and sharing her story. Each time, She repeated the words Richard had told her, "You are always worth choosing." One evening, as she prepared for her first small chess competition at school, Emily looked at her mother nervously. "What if I lose?" she asked. Her mother knelt beside her and said, "Winning isn't everything, Emily. What matters is that you are brave enough to sit at that table. That alone makes you a winner." Richard, who had come to see her off, added, "And remember, champions don't always win every game. Champions are the ones who never stop believing in themselves." Emily nodded, her little heart swelling with courage. She went on to play in the competition, not winning first place but winning something far greater: the respect and admiration of everyone there. Richard watched proudly as she accepted her small medal for participation. The way she smiled at that moment told him she had finally discovered her worth. From then on, Emily never sat quietly at the edge of the playground again. Whenever she rolled into the park with her chessboard, children ran toward her, eager to play. She was no longer the girl no one chose, she was the girl everyone looked forward to seeing. Richard continued to visit her often. Their bond grew stronger, not as a billionaire and a stranger, but as friends who had changed each other's lives. Emily gave Richard something his billions never could: a sense of meaning. And Richard gave Emily something her tears had hidden for years: a voice, confidence, and the certainty that she was never invisible. The story of Emily and Richard spread far and wide, but for them, the most important part wasn't the fame or the attention. It was the simple afternoons spent on a park bench, with a chessboard between them, laughter in the air, and hearts full of hope. In the end, Emily's life was no longer shaped by the wheelchair she sat in but by the dreams she carried within her. And Richard's life was no longer measured only by skyscrapers and wealth but by the quiet joy of choosing kindness. The world had been shocked by his reaction that day in the park, but the truth was simple: kindness doesn't need to be shocking. It just needs to be shared. And as the years went by, Emily never forgot the day a stranger noticed her tears and chose to sit beside her. She never forgot the moment someone told her she was worth choosing. And Richard never forgot the sound of her laughter, the laughter that reminded him that even in a world full of riches, the greatest treasure was a single smile from a child who finally felt seen.